have Hereditary. I don't know about you, but this movie deeply disturbed me. And I was hitting pause throughout it for a number of reasons. This movie is about a family who is apparently tied to a cult by their bloodline. The cult was run by the children's grandmother. In the end, her goal was to summon the demon of hell. And now there are a number of disturbing scenes. Number 1, spoiler alert, the little girl in the film gets her head chopped right off. It literally comes out of nowhere. And the character Peter, his silence goes on for like 5 minutes and it's traumatizing. Surely after that scene, you need to pause just to catch your breath. The next moment would be something you might not catch upon first viewing. But later on, there is a scene that's a wide shot of the family's home at night. You'll need to pause it, and once you do, you'll see that the house is surrounded by naked cult members. It's incredibly eerie. They're all just waiting for Peter to get possessed. Next time you're watching the movie, make sure you pause and check out that one scene. In our 4th spot, we have It. For this one, I'm talking about the 2017 film, not the original one from 1990. In the remake, they put in lots of little foreshadowing and creepy parts that will make you pause the film. In particular, there are a lot of times that Pennywise appears in the film without actually popping up and scaring the kids. I find these little sneaky cameos just make the film that much more creepier. One of his first appearances is when Billy heads down to his basement. Pennywise's yellow glowing eyes can be seen watching him by the stairs before he emerges from the water. Pennywise made his next appearance when another one of the kids, Ben, was in the library. He is first seen possessing the body of the librarian and creepily just stands there watching Ben. Now, as Ben continues his research in the library, he also comes across some history on the town about an Easter egg hunt massacre. This took the lives of a number of kids. Although you may not be able to see it until it's paused, Pennywise actually appears in that photo. In another scene, Pennywise appears on a brick wall mural behind the kids. It's little Easter eggs like this that make people pause the film. In our 3rd spot, we have Psycho. Now let's turn our attention to the 1960 Alfred Hitchcock movie, Psycho, all about Norma and Norman Bates. In this film, there's a really creepy visual that first just appears as if it's just a normal transition, so it often goes overlooked. I mean, it appears for a split second, so fans have to pause it in order to catch it. Basically, this happens during a scene where Norman Bates is in the police station. There's a moment of stillness where he just looks directly at the camera and smiles. Right before it transitions into the next scene, if you pause it, you can see Norman's face is merged with his mother's decaying corpse, who he murdered. This scene has been studied by film students around the world. It's the final transition in the film, and it's just a genius one. In our 2nd spot, we have Gerald's Game, another mind bender of a movie that will leave you feeling very uncomfortable. Basically, the story revolves around a woman named Jessie who heads out to a country house with her husband, Gerald. They went out there to, spice things up. Eventually, things get steamy and Jessie gets cuffed to the bed, but her husband suffers from a heart attack. Since she's all tied up, she pretty much is useless and can't help him. Then a series of whack things happen, including Jessie trying to take off her cuffs. She does this by slicing her wrists with some glass and then pulling off her skin. It's a very disturbing scene. And in the end, her hand is completely skinned. It's gross. Apparently, the scene was a lot for viewers, and a lot of pauses happened before, during, and after the scene. And I understand that, because I am not big into gore. And in our number 1 spot, we have The Cabin in the Woods. There are 2 main scenes in Cabin in the Woods that are commonly paused. The first one being in the underground laboratory whiteboard scene. If you've seen this movie, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. On the whiteboard, there are lists of creatures. Some are classic monsters, like zombies, clowns, werewolves, vampires, you get it. But they also make a couple of references to multiple monsters from other iconic horror movies, like the Deadites from Evil Dead, or The Reanimated, which is a tribute to H.P. Lovecraft's horror story and the film adaptation, The Reanimator. A lot of fans have paused it at that moment to read the list and check out all the movie's Easter eggs. Now, the second most paused moment in the film would be the ending. In the ending scene, if you pause and observe the monsters and their little container things, you can see Pennywise, the twins from The Shining, and characters from the game Left 4 Dead, among others. So again, people love to pause it there too, just to see what characters from other movies they recognize.
Kicking off the list at number 5, The Conjuring 2, a personal favorite. Shared universes between movie franchises is of course common. We saw it in most superhero films, but what about a shared horror universe? That's the question. Can it work? Well, James Wan has created this super successful Conjuring universe where we see paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren show up in different solo flicks like Annabelle or The Nun. And with The Conjuring 3 and The Crooked Man announced to be Warner Bros. Newest installments of the shared universe, it's only fair to look back at one of my favorite Easter eggs from The Conjuring 2. The film itself is pretty loaded plot-wise. It's actually a quite fun, fast-paced horror, with a few blink and you miss it Easter eggs, one of which is when the climax of the movie could have been completely resolved if Lorraine Warren had just looked to the left. In this scene.
I'm sorry, Lorraine.
So the climax of the movie is basically you have to say the demon's name. That gives you power over the entity. So in a last-minute attempt to save the day, Lorraine Warren finds this book. It was a Bible, and she realizes that she had actually scratched the name down on those pages of that Bible. But if you take a sneaky little look at the background there, you can see the demon's name, Valak, just casually, if not beautifully placed. I saw The Conjuring 2 in theaters alone because, you know, I'm a crazy person, I guess. And the first time I watched it, I saw this name on the shelf. They even show us the first letter, which is clearly a V, so I thought, V, what is she writing? And then I saw the name Valak on the shelf, and my first thought was, oh, maybe it's like a lost family member, maybe something personal that we'll find out later. No biggie. No, it was just a fun little Easter egg. Well, big Easter egg, rather. That's not the only time either where you can see Valak written out in front of you. It's seen in the background when Ed and Lorraine are talking at the table. And here. But I mean, this one here, come on. I mean, Easter eggs are always fun, but when the plot resolves around knowing that specific word to save the entire day and to conclude the film, makes it kind of weird that they didn't just figure this out earlier. Bonus points to James Wan for giving Patrick Wilson an old friend as well as an extra for his 2018 Aquaman flick. Nothing beats the friendly face of Annabelle showing up out of the blue. The deep blue, rather. And before we move on to number 4, if you haven't done so already, make sure to just give this video a like while you're here. It should be easy to do. It's just the thumb right there. It's this one, not this one. Unless you're upside down, then sure. And number 4, Saw. We get another treat from James Wan. This time he is joined by his famous other half, Leigh Whannell. The two worked on the Saw franchise together, and since their early work, the duo has been known to drop Easter eggs left, right, and center. But one of the most important Easter eggs from the Saw franchise comes from a flashback from the first installment, Saw 1, very first, OG. Before we know about the big reveal, that is John Kramer being the big bad reveal at the end, we see a flashback to him in a hospital bed. And he's not just laying there being sick, he's actually laying in bed with sets of drawings laid in front of him. His drawings of the reverse bear trap, like blueprints. And then on the other page, you can see a bright X. Now, of course, the reverse bear trap was seen in full force and can't be unseen, that is. Still the worst trap of them all, I don't care what anybody says. No way. I'd do literally anything else. The bright X, of course, hinting at the glow in the dark X in the wall of the bathroom where they're all being held. This is crazy. They could have literally looked down and I'm sure they would have solved the case and most likely saved a lot of people. Like if one of the detectives is like, oh, it's him, it's definitely him. Yeah, arrest this man when he wakes up, arrest him, absolutely. It would have been so easy. All they had to do was look down, that's it. There's tons of Easter eggs in the Saw franchise, of course, but this one from the classic first movie has to take the cake. I'm surprised nobody really caught it until afterwards, including myself. Also, let me know which Saw trap was your favorite / worst down below because I'm curious. I like to read the comments and see if I'm not the only crazy person. Number 3, The Thing, 1982. The John Carpenter classic starring Kurt Russell is a simple and beautifully executed horror film. The team, of course, begins getting hunted down in Antarctica by a shape-shifting alien that can imitate anything organic, dogs included. Now, at the end of the film, the only surviving members of the expedition are, of course, Kurt Russell's character, MacReady, and Keith David's Childs. The ultimate question proposed at the end of the film is, who of the two is the Thing, if any of them? Now, with Childs not having any air, warm air coming out of his breath while he talks,
Won't last long, though.
Neither will we.
How will we make it?
A couple viewers could have picked up on the big clue before the credits rolled. In fact, it was actually at the beginning of the movie we got our biggest hint at how to solve this problem. See, before the dog ever reaches Outpost 31, we see the Norwegian weather research gang and they're chasing a dog. In fact, they're trying to shoot this dog. Like, I'm talking like Verdansk, but they're lining this thing up. They're really going for it. But because they're speaking in a different language, for a first time viewer, this scene is just showing, I guess, the full effects of cabin fever, maybe, or something else going on. Now, if you saw this movie for the first time with a buddy who could speak Norwegian, there would be a few whispers going on at the beginning of the film. Because the line that's yelled by the Norwegian gunsman translate in English to, "Get the hell out of there, that's not a dog, it's some sort of thing. It's imitating a dog. It isn't real. Get away, you idiots." Like, imagine if you were watching this movie with your Norwegian buddy and then that scene happened. He would lean over like, oh, I think I have an idea of what's gonna happen right now. And number 2, Get Out. One of my favorite movies of all time and my favorite directors of all time. Get Out, of course directed by comedic and now horror master Jordan Peele, was released in 2017 and starred Daniel Kaluuya, Allison Williams, and Catherine Keener. The film was centered around the relationship of Chris Washington and Rose Armitage. We find Chris on his way to meet Rose's family, and when he gets there, they're kind of insane, just a little bit different than your classic family. Rose's mother, Missy, has this ability where she can make you quit smoking or, you know, quit life. She's good like that, with her hands and her tap 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 thing. The movie itself is foreshadowing and Easter eggs. I mean, Jordan Peele spent so much time and effort in every shot and every single line that even after a third viewing, I'm picking up more subtleties that I missed before. There's one Easter egg in particular that could have changed the entire second half of the movie. If Chris happened to just take Swahili classes on the side, I mean, he may have had a better fate. More than once you can hear the beautifully sinister melody composed by Michael Abels, titled Sikalizwa Kwa Wahenge. My apologies if I absolutely butchered that. I've tried to say it 3 times. My tongue doesn't work like that. The tune itself fits perfectly with the film because when you translate the lyrics, it says the line, "Brother, listen to the ancestors, run, you need to run far." Now, at this point in the movie, Chris has some feelings towards the family. He's picked up on some strange behavior. He's kind of got one foot in and out of the door at this point, relationship-wise, and with the whole trip in general. Now, if this song had played and the lyrics were understood, Chris would have maybe clicked, perhaps viewed it as a sign. Kind of like when you're thinking about somebody and then a song comes on the radio and you're like, this song hasn't played in 18 years. What the hell? I'm gonna call them right now. And then you call them and they're like, yeah, I'm fine. It's absolutely fine, don't worry. Like, Chris maybe would have had one of those moments where he's like, oh, these lyrics are weird. Makes me think about some other things, some other going-ons in this crazy house. And then maybe he would have left. I don't know. If you're a fan of Get Out, you have to check out Us, if you haven't done so already. Somebody asked me what movie I prefer, and I'm legit stuck. They're both so different, but they're both so good. Which of the 2 is your favorite? Let us know. And finally, number 1, Final Destination 2. When death has its sights on you, you're toast, brother. We've seen 5 movies now where death clearly can't be stopped, but what if a simple fridge note was the reason all the characters in a movie died in alternate ways, and maybe adjusted the plot? See, in Final Destination 2, we see Evan Lewis, this lucky, cocky lottery winner that died in a brutal car fire in Kimberly's early premonition. Now, of course, all of the players in Death's game dies in the same order as the premonition, but what if it skipped you? Well, according to the movies, if it skips you, Death would eventually make its way back around to get you. But that would be an entirely different movie and perhaps a more tense film. Like, what if Evan skipped Death? How could he even do so, you ask? Well, in the opening shot of his death sequence at the beginning of the movie in his apartment, you can see fridge magnets in the background. And the fridge magnets go from saying, hey E, I assume like hey Evan, and then the H falls and lands in his food. Now this is a fun little hint at how he'll die. And of course, Kimberly figures out that there's hints like this throughout the entire movie. So not only does the director want us to catch these hints, but it's kind of a big deal to the plot as well. So if Evan had just looked up and caught this pretty obvious Easter egg, that being a letter in his food, he would have avoided the fire. And the gross eye thing that happened to him with the ladder, gross, he would have cheated death. And if it had skipped Evan, he would of course been alive while the others were being stalked. And the idea that death moves in a specific order would have been dismissed. They wouldn't have even thought of that as an option. And if that happened, well, perhaps Kimberly wouldn't have drowned herself in order to change the path. Would have been an entirely different movie. The movie probably wouldn't have even happened. Would have been people just dying, and then Evan would have been like, yeah, I'm rich. And then some spaghetti would have shot into his eye or something again the next week, or something crazy.
Coming in at number 5, we've got The Car from The Mist. This is a death, or I suppose a group of deaths, that plenty of folks will have burned into their brain for the rest of time. It's the kind of event that leaves you feeling lost and nauseous. Like, why couldn't he wait a little longer? How could this happen? It's so tragic, so raw. Unfortunately, this adaptation of Stephen King's famous novella of the same title decided that the ending had to be much darker. Like, way darker. In the novella, a small group of survivors break through and make it out of the grocery store and onto the roads. They travel for a bit, taking a few losses as they go, but then hear a distorted radio transmission, giving them some sort of vague hope. It ends without telling us what happens to the characters we've been following. In the movie The Mist, we get a different ending. We get upset. After escaping the supermarket, they hop in a car and find David's wife dead. His house is destroyed, giant monsters roam the earth. To make matters even worse, the car's running out of gas. Instead of potentially falling victim to one of the abominations inhabiting the mist, the car squad resolves to kill themselves and be done with it. The devil you know and all that jazz. So David takes his gun, which now has 4 bullets, and domes everyone in the car but himself. A noble sacrifice, don't you think? Well, all the noble points and the grim satisfaction he got from saving his loved ones from a horrible death dissipate along with the mist as the army rolls in and saves the day. Goodness gracious, giving it all up for nothing. Didn't see that one coming. Coming in at number 4, we've got Paul and Jessica from The Descent. Staying on the topic of tragic car deaths, let's talk about the opening 5 minutes of the modern classic, The Descent. All is well. We have friends, whitewater rafting, they're wearing helmets, it's all good. We have a loving husband and a daughter watching on from a safe distance. We have a potential love triangle denoted by some sneaky leeward glances. This could be setting us up for some personal drama, but holy crap, not in the way anybody expected. As Sarah and her lovely little family drive home, she asks her husband Paul about his involvement with her best friend Juno. Maybe not directly, but he knows what she's talking about. Paul gets a little too distracted by this inquisition, and uh-oh. Instead of an uproarious fight about infidelity, we get a car crash with long metal poles through the bodies of Paul and daughter Jessica. Like, literally nothing has happened yet. No horror-themed setups, no big conflicts. It's during the setup to the setup, a family is reduced to 1. People came into this movie expecting a creepy, claustrophobic cave crawl, but before caves are even mentioned, our main character endures one of the most terrible losses imaginable. It's insane. Plus, it sets up a later betrayal, which may or may not impact the 2 alternate endings. Either way you look at it though, if Juno had just kept it in her pants, this family wouldn't have fallen victim to a Final Destination style death. Coming in at number 3, we've got the Consec Scanner from Scanners. This one speaks for itself. Nobody talks about 80s horror or Cronenberg or even gore in general without discussing this classic dome explosion. And like, even going into this movie, knowing that you're watching a Cronenberg movie doesn't prepare you for the absolute destruction this man's head undergoes. It's wild. Early on, we see Daryl Revick watching a televised presentation showing off the latest and greatest of Consec scanners. Psychics with all sorts of tele-abilities, kinesis, pathy, and the like. Being a cocky, angry man, Revick decides he'll go and volunteer to be experimented on in order to really show off his abilities. And by show off his abilities, I mean explode a man's head so completely that he resembles a famous fantasy horseman. The lead up is so clinical, so dry, it almost seems as if he really will just take part in a live experiment. Folks in the crowd look on with a mixture of boredom and disbelief. Well, at first anyways. Once the quote-unquote thought experiment begins, things get a little weird. But still, it's just some dudes looking uncomfortable, straining a little. Couldn't be that bad. Oh wait. Yes, it can. A pitch-perfect mixture of surprise and splatter, this skull bomb is going to be studied for years and years to come. One more time for good luck. Coming in at number 2, we've got Russell Franklin from Deep Blue Sea. Okay, I might be a little obsessed with this one, just a little bit, but there really is nothing like it. A hyper-intelligent shark biding its time, watching and waiting until Samuel L. Jackson's character decides to give a stirring speech about the importance of teamwork and sanity, and then leaping out of the diving tank to cut him short in a flurry of surf and shark teeth. Russell Franklin didn't see it coming. The other doctors didn't see it coming. The audience, spurred on by riveting calls to action and inspirational music, sure as hell didn't see it coming. It is the perfect sucker punch. Many movies attempt this kind of out-of-the-blue craziness and only few succeed. But Deep Blue Sea did, and for that reason I must keep mentioning it in lists about surprises. Damn, and I thought Mr. Franklin was gonna make it. Honestly, all the deaths in this movie were pretty unexpected. Like, the first two doctors we meet find themselves face to face with death earlier than anticipated, and the only two folks to make it out alive are the shark wrangler and the cook. Not exactly the top billed characters for survival, you know? But hey, more movies should make odd choices and take risks like that, and then maybe they'd be a little more memorable. And maybe, just maybe, they'll show the audience something they didn't expect. And finally, at number 1, we've got Bill Murray from Zombieland. Double points for this one. First of all, who saw Bill Murray coming? Unless you'd gone in knowing that he was going to be in the movie, you definitely thought that visiting Bill Murray's house was just a running gag. But lo and behold, Bill Murray is still living in the Hollywood Hills, surviving by looking and acting like a zombie. And good for him! But his presence was definitely unexpected. Then, in a bizarre twist of fate, Bill Murray, the last living star in Hollywood, is gunned down by our fearless protagonist nonetheless. Well, maybe not fearless, but still. So in a movie that nobody expected Bill Murray to show up in, Bill Murray dies a tragic death, all while playing himself, playing a zombie so he could avoid being eaten. There are layers to this gag, and it still chokes me up every time I see it. Poor Bill, he was just trying to go along to get along, and he could have provided the group with all sorts of additional info about how he survived too. And who doesn't want to watch screenings of Ghostbusters in a private movie theater during a zombie apocalypse? Fate is so cruel and so hard to predict. Coming in at number 5, A Nightmare Off Elm Street. We'll start with this one because it garnered quite a bit of attention in the trailer. That's right, this iconic homage and terrifying moment made its way into the previews. If anything, that should tell you how scary the rest of the movie should be. Early on, we meet a young lad named David Glatzel. This poor child does not know what's about to happen to him. While hanging out on a waterbed, he starts to notice something going awry. The aquatic sleeping apparatus starts to contort violently, and eventually a grotesque human hand flies up and grabs the kid. Terror all around. This is the event that kickstarts the rest of the movie as David's exorcism sends the demon into Arnie Johnson. But why did the demon choose David? Kids don't really know how to summon demons. Well, as it turns out, there is a cursed object beneath the waterbed, and David was the person unlucky enough to come face to face with the demon. Now, there's no denying the direct connection between this scene and the one in Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master. Folks with a degree from Freddy Krueger U will immediately see where this inspiration came from. In The Dream Master, teenager Joey experiences what one might call a wet dream, where a lovely lady appears inside of the blue lagoon that is his waterbed. Joey's a little too enthusiastic, and Freddy Krueger pulls a fast one on him, popping up in the model's place and drowning the poor kid. Of course, 8-year-old David Glatzel wasn't interested in any attractive women under his bed, he was just trying to hang out. But director Michael Chavez did say that Nightmare on Elm Street did play a part in inspiring this scene. In fact, The Dream Master is one of the first horror movies he remembers watching. So even if the context isn't one-to-one, the waterbed is an image from the 80s that stuck out in his mind and seemed to be the perfect fit for a movie set in 1981. You wonder why waterbeds went out of style, right? Well, this might have something to do with it. That and having to run a hose to your bedroom. There's something about it that just isn't right. Coming in at number 4, Father Gordon. If we're focusing on references to other horror, then we'll stick with that theme for a while longer. When you think of the word exorcism, what do you imagine? If anything other than the Friedkin classic comes to mind, you've got to get your priorities straight. This, of course, is exactly what Chavez was imagining when putting together this movie. When an exorcist makes the journey to the Glatzel household, there is only one way to introduce this holy man, with an homage to Father Merrin. The arrival in the dark, the fog, the back bumper of the taxi, the briefcase, the hat, the coat, it all comes together in a lovingly detailed recreation of one of the most iconic shots of all time. If you doubt the authenticity of my claim, you can look right to the director of The Conjuring 3 himself. That's right, he's come forward and happily admitted to this being a shameless Exorcist reference. Horror buffs can pick out stuff like that from miles away. Even the exorcism of David contains a whole bunch of Exorcist style stuff. We've got the young child unfortunately battling a demon and a bunch of horrific contortions. No demonic puke or head spinning this time though, and Father Gordon seems a bit better equipped to deal with the demonic entity than Father Mother Marin was. Hopefully the filming of this exorcism was a little less chaotic than its influence. Looking back at the production of Friedkin's Exorcist, a lot went wrong and resulted in some people getting hurt. We've come a long way in terms of on-set safety since, so we can probably assume that they made sure not to repeat the harmful incidents during his homage. Coming in at number 3, Flowers from Your Friends. This one might have flown by a little quickly, but some eagle-eyed movie watchers picked up on it regardless. There's a bouquet of flowers that makes a short appearance on camera, sent from a family that folks might recognize. If you take a closer look, you'll see that they were sent by the Perron family. Who could that be, you might ask? Well, hopefully you watched the first 2 movies in the series before diving into The Conjuring 3. You can probably skip the spin-offs and still have a good understanding of what's going on, but the mainline ones? Come on, be a completionist. The Perrons are the family from the first Conjuring movie who lived in that horribly haunted home on Rhode Island. At first, their haunting wasn't so bad. Folks told them to keep their lights on at night, and at times their kids would get tucked in by friendly ghosts. But as time went on, things got much worse. More spirits started appearing, and these ones were not very friendly. Kids would be attacked by unseen entities, and phantoms would send them horrifying messages of death and gloom. Ed and Lorraine stepped in though and did what they could for the family. It's fun to see that the folks behind these flicks keep the Warrens' contacts and previous clients in the loop. Coming in at number 2, The Nun makes an appearance. You know, Valak, the creepy nun who appears first in The Conjuring 2 and then in her own spin-off. Dark robes, pale skin, horrifying demonic eyes. You know her. What do you mean you didn't see her in The Conjuring 3? Oh, you know what? I should have been more clear. The nun herself doesn't make an appearance, but a little itty-bitty version of her does. I'm talking about a nun doll. Who would want such a thing? Beats me. But Arnie, our poor defendant, actually owns a tiny nun doll. In his room above the boarding kennels, there is a toy nun on his bookshelf. Now, this could just be a cheeky little reference to the other movies, because I highly doubt that Arnie Johnson has any actual connection to the nun before he was possessed and visited by the Warrens. But it is an interesting little detail, and one that'll make any trivia-focused fan lose their mind. Why would he have a toy nun in the first place? Who wants a toy nun? Is this foreshadowing? Will it make another appearance somewhere soon? We may never know. Or maybe we will. And finally at number 1, Psycho Killer. Or I guess just Psycho. See, there are a lot of references to classic horror in this movie. As we've already discussed, director Michael Chavez has no problem admitting to this and even sees it as a fun way to engage the audience. Let's be real. Horror fans love pointing out when something is pulled from another movie. It's in our blood. I think the only fans who have us beat are comic book fans, but then again, like, crossover events are like their whole thing. Okay, let's focus up here. Back to poor young Glatzel. He manages to have an Elm Street experience and a Bates Motel experience too. While in the shower, our young pal gets a deluge of blood straight to the dome. Probably not chocolate syrup like in the Hitchcock classic, but hey, this is followed up by a much more subtle nod. Again, when the father arrives for the exorcism. However, this has nothing to do with the movie The Exorcist. This is a definite Psycho reference. If you look closely, there's a figure in the window. Shades of Mother Bates looking down from her perch above the Bates Motel. Chavez wasn't so sure he could keep this bit in, saying, "When we screened it, I was on the verge of cutting it out. I was like, it's too on the nose. You're just shamelessly stealing from the greatest movie of all time. But I kept it, and I was glad I did, because when we started screening it, people loved it. They loved being able to see those references and make those connections. And hey, you know what? It looks like it worked. No better way to get some free and easy good reactions than by referencing something that everybody likes. Kinda like that time in Cabin in the Woods."